Now you can go beyond the realm of any movie into the future of live entertainment, where every adventure you've seen on the screen happens to you. They come to the only place on Earth where everything that happens in the movies happens to you. The only place where you can join Doc Brown on a rocket ride into a new dimension of thrills and excitement as you go back to the future. Live the movies at Universal Studios, Florida.
Kids are twisting the top, bending the necks, and squeezing the bottles for everything they're worth. Its taste is so outrageously fruity. It's completely out of control. So watch out for Kool-Aid Cool Bursts before it's too late.
Cool Bursts operate.
No one can stop the burst.
But not a new Hardee's Pizza Pocket, man. See, like the only place that the mozzarella and pepperoni goes is in your mouth. Not like slices. Hey, nice decoration, man.
Welcome to the final week of 90s March Madness. And let me tell you, when I made a poll that had the distinctive theme of Out with a Bang, there was one title that held on pretty strong, even when there was a tiebreaker. It almost seemed like as if Dick Tracy was going to make it out, but no. We can't end it like that. It's got to be with Darkman. If Batman ended the blockbuster era of the 1980s, Darkman set the tone for what to expect in the new decade. It was taking classic tropes of the past and giving them an update for a new generation. It carried a mix of horror and comic book style ideas while being different and fresh. The plot involves a scientist named Peyton who is trying to perfect synthetic skin, but the problem is that the cells can't last beyond 99 minutes. It's not until by pure accident that it's discovered the cells are photosensitive and they last better in the dark.
This is unbelievable.
What is it about the dark? What secret does it hold?
It seems like things are in a turnaround until a crime boss and his thugs break in, searching for a memorandum document that proves some real estate developer has been bribing the zoning commission. Once they find the document, Peyton is subjected to the most brutal torture that any character in any movie or form of media has ever endured. He's bashed against equipment, his hands are burned, they dunk his body in pink-colored chemicals, they shoot his lab assistant, and as a final insult, they blow up his lab with the means of a drinking bird and a cigarette lighter. On paper, this sequence would read as disturbing and painful. Yet, the over-exaggerated execution helps level off some of the intensity. It's this scene right here that sets the tone for the rest of the movie, as we're in for something that's both colorful, but yet a little uncomfortable at the same time. Peyton is deemed dead, but in reality, he's discovered by doctors with no identity, and they subject him to an experiment that severs the nerves so he doesn't feel pain from the burns. This also allows his strength and emotions to be increased, but at the cost of being unable to maintain self-control of his own aggression. Once Peyton escapes and becomes angered by his own circumstance, he plans to recreate the synthetic skin experiment in order to regain his old life back while seeking revenge against the people that took it away from him. The most unique aspect of Darkman is how it combines elements of a comic book and classic horror. There's the disfigurement and doomed romance from Phantom of the Opera, tragic elements from Hunchback of Notre Dame, but told in the manner of a pulp superhero icon like The Shadow. It's more ironic as Raimi set his sights to adapt The Shadow, but couldn't obtain the rights from Universal Studios. Thus, he decided to make his own, but with the idea of a man who could change his face to become others. Even if there are horror elements, the true heart of Darkman involves a guy trying to reclaim the love he lost, despite looking hideous. We really root for Peyton trying to change his life around, but even we have a feeling that seems impossible. It does make me wonder if this is what it was like back then in the 1930s and 40s, when folks were seeing horror icons like Frankenstein, Dracula, or the Wolfman, and having similar sympathetic feelings for creatures that want to be understood, but neglected and rejected by the public. It's also ironic to see this being greenlit by Universal Studios, which gives one to wonder if this is a lost studio monster that just made its way to the modern era. It feels refreshing to see a movie that does its own thing, while taking some familiar tropes that are not too far removed to keep it more unique and original. Credit goes to Liam Neeson as Peyton, who carries this movie. He channels the sympathetic and demented side of this character very well. You feel so much pain for this guy that you want to root for him to win. You are convinced this guy is so unhinged to the point of madness, while also understanding the sadness of his character. There are two scenes that illustrate this well. One is when he's trying to replicate his experiments and his hand catches fire. Peyton starts to realize he can't feel pain and starts to notice the burn condition of his skin. It's sad, and you feel the heartbreak knowing just how much of his life is gone from one simple gesture.
My hands. They took my hands.
Another is when he has a mental breakdown in front of a stray cat.
What am I? Some kind of a circus freak? Maybe I should be wearing a funny little hat. Do you like it? See the dancing freak. Pay $5 to see the dancing freak.
He goes bananas and starts smashing stuff until he finally sees his reflection and tries to calm himself down. He has instincts of a monster, but you really feel for his pain. Even the makeup work is not too grotesque, and one can see a sense of humanity lost among the skin burns. Here is the perfect definition of a tragic figure. There's also Frances McDormand as Julie, the love interest who works as an attorney and has deep feelings for Peyton. I enjoy how we see scenes early on between her and Neeson that show the deep chemistry they carry. I even like how they come off feeling like a legit couple, and it makes things harder when Peyton tries to use the synthetic skin to get her back into his life. She has zero idea of what happened, knowing she thinks that he's dead. And when she finds out the truth later, it makes the situation harder when Julie doesn't know how to take the truth behind her lost lover and what he's trying to accomplish.
You should have told me. You should have come to me, Pate. You didn't have to lie.
Then there's Larry Drake as Robert G. Durant, a sadistic mob boss who looks calm and collective on the outside, but has a sick and twisted mindset on the inside. Drake gives a chilling performance that doesn't go too over the top, but saves it for the later parts of the movie.
How many times do I have to tell you I was nowhere near any convenience store, you nitwit?
Hey, I could barely get him to post bail. They had the whole thing on video.
Just keep him out of my hair!
Most of the time, Drake holds back his crazed nature when he does terrible things, like cutting off fingers of the people he killed for his personal collection. He only becomes manic during the big action set pieces later on, which makes Drake's performance entertaining and unforgettable. One of the best scenes is easily when Peyton doubles as Durant to obtain cash for his research. However, when the real Durant bumps in, all hell breaks loose between the two.
Me, him! Shoot him! Shoot him!
You really gotta condemn the amount of split screen and use of doubles for this. You actually do kind of feel there are two of the same Larry Drakes in one scene beating the crap out of each other. I even enjoy the lineup of thugs Durant has to his will. Each one of them is defined by their own characteristics and are easily memorable. There's Skip, who keeps a gun inside his wooden leg, Paulie, who deserves the title of world's biggest glutton,
Get your gift, huh? You be good. Yummy. Take care of business, man.
Rick, an extended cameo by Ted Raimi, who gets the most hilarious death in the whole movie.
It's the Muppet Show with our very special guest star, John Denver.
And that's just to name a few. It makes for great fodder for Peyton to go after, and we enjoy seeing each of them get their own payback. The only negative I have is Colin Friels as the true villain, Louis Strack Jr., a corrupted businessman who plans to take out tons of property to build some city of the future. He uses the services of Durant to get what he wants. Colin's performance is not too bad, but there's nothing interesting about how his character is written. Given how Peyton's revenge is more focused on Durant and crew, Strack Jr.'s inclusion feels more like an afterthought than an opposing element. There's so much focus on Durant that you kind of forget Strack Jr. is the true criminal mastermind. Apparently there was more material with him, but it got cut out. Most of it involved a subplot where he tries to get property from someone and uses Durant to assassinate him. There's even one scene where he literally makes love to a batch of gold coins on his bed. It is one of the most bizarre deleted scenes I have ever seen, and I'm glad it was removed. You know, it's funny when you think about it. At the tail end of the 1980s, a lot of studios thought that superhero-themed movies were considered non-profitable, especially after what Superman 4 did. And to think 2 years later they were proven wrong when Tim Burton's Batman came on the scene. If anything, Darkman was a perfect follow-up to that, given it was what audiences were looking for. Big bloated action set pieces with a lot of grand spectacle, and all wrapped with a unique premise to boot. Ironic, given that 2 months prior, Walt Disney promoted the hell out of their adaptation of Dick Tracy, only to find that what they marketed was the next big Batman was a more romanticized pulp noir flick. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Dick Tracy, I really do. At some point I would love to cover that flick, but point being, this was what folks were really looking for, and it truly delivered. And in an interesting way, you can kind of also see it as a foundation for what Sam Raimi would later do with the Spider-Man movies in the 2000s. Sam Raimi really wanted to establish himself as more than just a horror director. After working on the first 2 Evil Dead movies and Crime Wave, he really wanted to show studios what he was capable of. Darkman carries a lot of his signature trademark styles, from montages to visual storytelling that he would port over into future projects. There is never a dull moment as audiences are engrossed in stunning action sequences that keep topping each other, a great use of colors that give a comic book feel to the framing of some images, and there's a delightful fun atmosphere within the dark concept. I especially like when we go inside Peyton's mind and see flashes of what he's going through. It really does feel like you're peeking inside one's brain with all these nerves and disturbing images popping in front of you. They come so fast that one would have to pause the movie at times just to marvel at the great lengths to create such bizarre imagery that's only seen for a short time. Even some moments feel taken straight out of a comic book, like the helicopter fight, or Peyton going head-to-head with Strack Jr. at the end. One of the weirdest scenes is when Peyton tries to win at a carnival game, but the booth manager gives him a hard time just for one simple stupid thing. The camera shots get more distorted and twisted as we feel Peyton's anger brew to a pure boiling point. Damn! And what was that over? Just for a stuffed pink elephant? Jeez! When it came to post-production, it was a nightmare. Universal Studios scrambled when they saw Darkman was not testing well with audiences, in fact received the lowest scores in the studio's history, prompting a bunch of editors to be hired on and try to make something salvageable. They were able to get it down to an 85-minute cut that Universal was pleased with, but producer Rob Tappert disagreed with this particular edition. Him and editor Bob Mursky decided to take this particular cut and completely re-edited it. They added back in 9 minutes of stuff that was cut out from other editions, and that became the final cut. This did not please executives when they found out this renegade edition would be sent out for critical reviews and straight to print so audiences could see this movie in the summer of 1990. You know, this almost reminds me of when they had Phantom of the Opera back in 1925. A film that was considered a little too gutsy for being a gothic horror film, completely reshot with material to make it more action-adventure heavy, and when that version didn't do so well, they tried to salvage as much as they could with the 2 versions to make something commercially feasible. Whew, let me tell you, what comes around, goes around. Most of the stuff that didn't end up in either cuts were probably for the best. Shout Factory released a new edition with over 30 minutes of material that didn't make it in. There is some interesting stuff like Peyton getting cold feet on proposing to Julie, but I feel this sours the relationship more.
I asked her, and she said she wasn't sure. She needed time to think about it.
There are small moments that seem to heavily hint they have zero chance of getting back together, and I feel cutting this stuff was probably for the best. I feel it's more unique to see their relationship and understand why they love each other, so when they split apart, you feel that heartbreak greatly and want to see Peyton get back together, knowing that the odds are probably minimal. With these scenes added in, it clearly shows they have no chance, and I'm glad they were cut. I do miss one shot that feels like an homage to the 1925 silent take on Phantom of the Opera, where Peyton watches Julie meet Strag Jr. on a balcony. There's one scene I wish they kept in where we feel Julie's sadness deeper. While sitting in a restroom, she watches on, seeing the silhouette of a couple getting together, and they pan over to reaction, reminding her of how much she really loved Peyton. There's also Skip's death, which was really cartoony and not that interesting. And I guess in the original cut, the filmmakers toyed with the idea of letting Rick live or not. The scene where Peyton stalks him and eventually confronts him in his apartment are well shot and carry some interesting ideas, but yeah, I think his death in the final cut was way more unique. There's one scene where Peyton tries to make further friends with a stray cat by offering it tuna. Maybe it's because I'm a sucker for animals, but I feel adding this would have softened his relationship to the feline. Part of me does wish this stayed in the final cut. I could go down the line and discuss every individual scene placed here, but bottom line, the final cut of the movie still plays well without this bulk of footage. Still, it makes for a fascinating look at what Darkman could have been. When Darkman debuted on August 24th, 1990, one day before my birthday, it was marketed with a massive hype campaign that really sold on the mystery of the character. And it worked! Even though tons and tons of money were not completely spent on the advertising, the curiosity by the public was fueled with simple signs on buses and benches that carried the phrase, "Who is Darkman?" It was by far a very clever idea that even Sam Raimi was fond of. It's a shame the movie was too adult to be used as a merchandise maker for children, but that didn't stop Darkman from being a hit. On a budget of $14 million, it debuted #1 in opening weekend, eventually grossing $33 million domestically. It truly went down in the history books as a commercial and critical hit at best, but once it hit home video, it went even farther, becoming an immediate cult classic. Almost big enough to spawn off 2 straight-to-video sequels, which are not really worth your time. If you want to see the continued adventures of Darkman, maybe, but for the most part, there's really not a whole lot you're missing. It even says a lot, too, when you have Imhotep from the Mummy movies playing the title character and doing an okay job. Yep, that's right, Arnold Vosloo taps in a Darkman. Not a bad choice, but he sadly lacks the charisma that Liam Neeson had. If anything, stick with the first movie. Darkman is more than a footnote of the 1990s, but an important turning point. It proved he could take old tropes and make good use of them. If you can't make an adaptation of an existing property, why not create your own and have some fun with it? All I can say is that this is pure proof that one doesn't need to remake or reboot a familiar title, but perhaps build on the foundations of what came prior and do something unique and different with it. It makes for something memorable and a pure crowd pleaser at best. Final verdict? Own it on Blu-ray. At least this edition by Shout Factory. When you really think about it, it's kind of unique to have something that digs way below the surface to show exactly how these movies get made. Well, I guess that wraps up year 1 of 90s March Madness, and I'd like to thank those over my Patreon page that voted for these movies. They were fun to look at, great to examine, and it was kind of interesting to see that a good majority of this year is more action-packed, superhero-heavy. Let's see if we can do some variety next year, but for the most part, I had fun, and no matter what we're going to do next time, I look forward to this brand new tradition. Until then, see you on the next upload, because next time we have a Patreon request from 1984. Later!
It was tough work. It was really, really tough, you know, but very, very enjoyable. Again, I loved working with Sam. It was really terrific. And I'd love to do something with him again, and I can't believe we shot that in 1989.
You are about to enter a world where people are moved by the music of a woman of beauty, where justice is in the hands of one man of courage, where the battle between good and evil is fought in streets of fire.
From now on, it's for real.
Starts Friday, June 1st at select theaters.